Mic's not on.
Thank you, Mickey. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Kennedy Center and to our special Millennium stage performance, celebrating the past to awaken the future. Thank you all for coming, and a warm welcome as well to everyone around the globe that will be watching this live-streamed event. Please welcome to the stage the Children's Chorus of Washington.
Success be
Now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Kennedy Center Chairman David M. Rubenstein.
First, let me thank the Children's Chorus of Washington for an extraordinary job. They've been performing in Washington for 20 years. And I'd like to thank particularly Joan Gregoric for our 20 years of service there. Can everybody hear me in the back? Yes, okay. So I want to welcome everybody today. I want to apologize for the change of plans. We intended to be outside in front of the Kennedy Center, but we can't control the weather, so we moved inside, and I hope everybody will be able to hear and enjoy what we have to say today. The Kennedy Center, of course, is the living memorial to President Kennedy. And it's appropriate that we have an event today for a couple reasons. One, it's Memorial Day weekend, and we celebrate all of those men and women who gave the last full measure of devotion to our country in public service. One of those, of course, was President Kennedy. It's also appropriate that we mark his service today, because today at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on 1917 in Brookline, Massachusetts, President Kennedy was born 99 years ago. We are going to mark the next year, next 365 days, we're going to celebrate the centennial of President Kennedy's birth up to the 100th birthday next year at this time. And we hope to spend a lot of time doing that by reminding people of what President Kennedy stood for and all the things that he did so wonderfully for our country. As part of that effort, I would like to just introduce and acknowledge one of my predecessors, Jim Johnson. Jim Johnson is right here. Jim, not only when he was chairman, helped conceive the stage that I'm on, the Millennium stage, but also he will be leading a task force for the Kennedy Center to determine ways that we can improve the ways that we honor and acknowledge President Kennedy's service to our country. And over the course of the next several months, some of those works and some of those ideas will be implemented, and ultimately, when we open the new editions, they will be fully implemented about a year and a half from now. I'd also like to acknowledge today some people who are here representing President Kennedy and his family. Two of his grandchildren are here. I'd like to acknowledge, and if they could stand up, Rose Schlossberg is over here. Rose. Rose is a member of the Kennedy Center Board, and from the time that the Kennedy Center was created, opened in 1971, there's always been a member of the Kennedy Center family on the board. I'd also like to acknowledge Jack Schlossberg is here. Jack, thank you. Jack is President Kennedy's only grandson, and he will be speaking a little bit later. So thank you both for coming, and thank you very much for everything you've done for the Kennedy family and everything you've done for the Kennedy Center. One other member of the family had intended to be here today and couldn't, but I'd just like to acknowledge her as well. Jean Kennedy Smith, President Kennedy's sister, who served on the Kennedy Center board for 44 years, the longest serving person who ever served on the board. She served also as ambassador to Ireland. And was President Kennedy, when he went to Ireland in June of 1963, he spent 4 days there. And he later said to his colleagues, these were the 4 happiest days of his life, and he intended to return the following spring. Obviously, events made that impossible, but his sister later became ambassador to Ireland, and she returned and represented the family and our country and did a spectacular job doing so. I'm sorry that Jean Kennedy Smith could not be here today, but I'd like to have a round of applause for her service to our country. So, for those of you who are not familiar with the Kennedy Center, and some of you may not have been here before, and some of you who are watching on live streaming may not be that familiar with it, the Kennedy Center was created as a living memorial to President Kennedy. And the reason it was done so is because President Kennedy not only embodied so many great ideas and ideals of the country, that it was thought by the leaders of our country at the time that we should make sure that we remember President Kennedy and do so through a living memorial. And it was thought that a cultural center was appropriate because as this cultural center was being conceived in the 1950s and early 1960s, President Kennedy, as president, spent an enormous amount of time trying to make certain that the funding was available and that there was leadership for this. And so upon his death, his widow, Jacqueline Kennedy, decided that it would be appropriate to name this to-be-built cultural center after him. When it opened in 1971, she attended, and ever since then, we've tried the best we can to embody the principles of President Kennedy. President Kennedy believed in many things, but among the things he believed in was the importance of arts and the importance of literature. And he once said, "I am certain that after the dust of centuries has passed over the cities, we too will be remembered not for victories or defeats in politics or battles, but for our contribution to the human spirit." And what he meant was, what we achieve in our daily lives are important things, but what's very important is the human spirit, the arts, the culture, the things that make humans so different from every other species on the face of the earth. And that's what the Kennedy Center is all about. We have performances, 2,000 a year, and we have about 2 million people attending those performances every year. But we also do an enormous amount of arts education, making certain that young people appreciate the importance of arts and also are trained and learn much more about our nation's artistic and cultural history. And so we're very pleased to be able to do that as part of our mission. Now, President Kennedy, when he went to Ireland, he said at the Irish Parliament something that I remembered for quite some time. When he was speaking to the Irish Parliament, and he said, quoting George Bernard Shaw, that some people see things as they are and say why, but others dream things that never were and ask why not. And President Kennedy was one of those people who asked why not frequently. He said, why not should we call upon Americans to serve their country and rather than just ask for things from their country? Why not should we have a group of individuals serving our country abroad, representing our country in the Peace Corps? Why not should we make certain that public universities are desegregated? Why not should we make certain that the Bill of Rights and the Constitution is implemented so everybody has equal rights and all civil rights are observed? Why not should we go to the moon? Those are some of the many things that President Kennedy dreamed about, and in his 1,000 days in office did enormous amounts of things to make certain those things were to happen. And I think a question I always ask myself is, why do we still remember President Kennedy and feel so intensely about him? He was born 99 years ago, and he died more than 50 years ago. Well, why are we so gathered here today to remember this man? It's because he inspired us. He inspired humans and Americans to do the best they can, to be better than they might otherwise be, to try to make the world a better place. And it was that inspiration that President Kennedy gave to us that is still with us, that inspired my generation to public service and inspired subsequent generations of public service, that is so important. And that's why we remember President Kennedy, and that's why we're here to honor him today. And it's also fitting that we do so today, because today we're in the middle this week of the Irish Festival. The Irish Festival is a festival designed to bring together Ireland and the United States and their cultures. And as we do so, we have the ambassador from Ireland here, and I'm going to introduce her in a moment. But I would say that President Kennedy, as I said, enjoyed immensely his time in Ireland and really intended to return. Couldn't do so, of course, but upon his death, his widow remembered one thing. When he was in Ireland, he saw an honor guard perform the most impressive honor guard ceremony at a cemetery that he'd ever seen. And he later asked for a video of that. Upon his death, his widow said, I want to make sure that that honor guard comes to President Kennedy's funeral. And they were the honor guard that performed at President Kennedy's funeral. They were the only foreign honor guard to ever perform at an American president's funeral. The ambassador to America from Ireland is Ann Anderson. She has worked tirelessly to make certain that the Irish Festival works so well, working closely with the Kennedy Center's Deborah Rutter, our president. Deborah Rutter is right here, our president. She's done a great job at leading the Kennedy Center. And working with Deborah on the Irish Festival is Alicia Adams. And Alicia Adams, Alicia, where are you? Right here, thank you. Alicia and Deborah have worked closely with Ann Anderson. And in my observation of Ann's work to make sure this festival has come together so well is that if St. Patrick himself were the ambassador to the United States from Ireland, he couldn't have done a better job than she's doing. It's with great pleasure that I introduce Ambassador Ann Anderson. Ambassador, thank you.
Well, thanks to David for such a very generous introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, it feels entirely fitting that the program of events to mark the centenary of the birth of President Kennedy is being launched in the course of the Ireland 100 Festival. There is a special symmetry, as if the fates weave again together stories that were so interwoven in life. Let us state it loudly and clearly and simply. John Fitzgerald Kennedy loved Ireland beyond any other country except his own, and we loved and cherished him in return. I want to take you back to President Kennedy's 4-day visit to Ireland in June '63, the visit that David has already mentioned. It was a visit that was emblematic of so much, one that is forever written on our hearts and stored in our memories. John Fitzgerald Kennedy came as a member of our extended family, someone whose 8 great-grandparents had all emigrated from Ireland. He came as the first sitting president of the United States to visit our country and the first foreign leader to address our parliament. He came in all his youth and vigor, with all his grace and optimism, his spontaneity and wit. He arrived with us in buoyant mood, fresh from that immortal speech in Berlin, ready to embrace his ancestral homeland. He found in Ireland even more than he could have imagined. There are experiences, in the words of Seamus Heaney, that come at us sideways and catch the heart off guard and blow it open. President Kennedy indeed had his heart blown open during those 4 days. As one of his closest advisors put it, he was never easier, happier, more completely himself than during those days. For our part, we loved who he was and what he stood for. It went way beyond the charm and the ease and the eloquence. We were delighted, of course, when he addressed the Irish Parliament that he quoted Joyce and Benjamin Franklin and Parnell, Yeats, Grattan, John Boyle O'Reilly, George Bernard Shaw. But beyond the wonderful felicity of language, it was the deeper notes we listened to, and that continued to vibrate long after he left our shores. The young president instinctively connected with us. He understood both our pride and our vulnerability, our dual identity as ancient country and young nation. He rejoiced in the shared past, but his eyes were firmly fixed on the future. He held out a vision of who we could be, of the destiny we could reach for, of where that quintessentially Irish combination of hope and confidence and imagination could lead us. More than 50 years have passed, and time has eroded some of the innocence of those days. The historians have given us a more nuanced picture of the president and his times, and we in some ways have become a different country, more mature, more diverse, fully at home within the European family, even as the bonds with America continue to strengthen. But the deep and true notes from all those years ago continue to vibrate today. Now, more than ever, we need President Kennedy's vision for the world and for America. A world that values multilateralism and understands the strength of soft power. An America of ambition and confidence, its windows wide open to the world, continually renewed and refreshed by the exchange of ideas and the interplay of cultures. As he left Ireland, President Kennedy promised to come back in the springtime. The poignancy of that unfulfilled promise has stayed with us throughout all the intervening decades. But now, in the late springtime of 2016, as we commemorate our own important anniversary, the artists of Ireland have made the journey in the reverse direction. They have brought their music and song and words to the Kennedy Centre. And as we hear them echo throughout this majestic building, it feels as if a circle is being closed. Always, in Ireland and wherever green is worn, President Kennedy will have a special place in our hearts. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Honorable Gina McCarthy, Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency.
Good evening. Thank you, David, for inviting me, and Ambassador Anderson. I especially want to thank the Kennedy family members who are in attendance. What an incredible honor it is to be here. I just never imagined when I was an Irish Catholic kid growing up in the Boston area that I'd one day get a chance to speak on behalf of the sitting President of the United States to honor President John F. Kennedy. So I am very excited to be here. Don't know how I got here, but it's good to be here. President Kennedy once spoke of peace after the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he said, "Let us not be blind to our differences, but let us direct attention to our common interests and to the means by which those differences can be resolved. And if we cannot end our differences, at least we can help the world be safe for diversity. For in the final analysis, our most common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's future, and we are all mortal." President Obama asked me to come this evening to remind us on the kickoff of a year-long celebration of President Kennedy's 100th birthday of the power of Kennedy's vision for a brighter future. His focus on our common interests, including the precious natural resources that we all share and that we all need. Of the strength of his leadership, his belief in the power and the resilience of the human spirit, the greatness of America, our scientists, our ingenuity, our innovation, our creativity, and yes, our determination. President Kennedy knew that the world looked to America to lead, and that meant that no challenge could be seen as too great for us to face together, not even putting a man on the moon. Well, President Kennedy was right, of course, and the world continues to look to the U.S. for leadership. And today, President Barack Obama is once again providing American leadership to tackle one of the greatest challenges of our time, the challenge of climate change. And once again, he is betting on American workers, on American businesses, on our scientists, and on our ingenuity and creativity to lead the world in reducing the carbon pollution that threatens the health and safety of and the future of our small planet. And thanks to American leadership, the world came together in Paris last December to sign on to a blueprint for an international effort to protect our common interests and our shared future. I think President Kennedy would have been proud. He would have understood what Pope Francis calls our moral obligation to act on climate, and he would have celebrated the fact that the world continues to look to the United States of America for leadership, and we are leading. So I'm glad to be here to help kick off this year-long celebration of President Kennedy's life and leadership. You know, John Quincy Adams, another great statesman from Massachusetts, once said, "If your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are a leader." So as we celebrate over the course of this year, let's do our best to do this President Kennedy's legacy justice, because I am not sure that 1 year is long enough, because he has inspired so many, including myself and President Obama, to dream more, to do more, and to become more. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the event.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Deborah Rutter, and I have the extraordinary honor of being the president of the Kennedy Center. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Jim. Thank you all for being here and for your with the weather and the change of the logistics and all the sound checks. We like to have our sound checks early in the afternoon so that you as our guests don't hear us preparing. But the show must go on, and that's what's happening here today. I really want to extend my gratitude to all of the people who are here participating in the event, kicking off this celebration that we at the Kennedy Center have had such a thrill and honor and joy in preparing over the last year. I want to recognize again Alicia Adams and her partner in crime and all manners, logistics, and creative, Gilda Almeida. Gilda, you deserve kudos as well. All of us know that these things take creativity, imagination, persistence, and in this case also a little bit of finances. So I'd like to ask you to join me in saying thank you to those who have made this whole festival, now for the Irish Festival and then looking forward. So if we could say thank you to Helen Henderson. Thank you, Helen. You are our star and our angel. And also to Altria, who have stood by us through thick and thin and who are celebrating this, helping us to celebrate the JFK centennial. So thank you also to Altria. This is a very special day, one we have been looking forward to. And to come together as an extended family, all of you here, to join together to commemorate John F. Kennedy's 99th birthday. We're excited finally to be able to begin this year-long centennial celebration, both the life and the legacy. And as you've heard so many beautiful words from the previous speakers, he instilled values and ideals in us and across so many generations. So how will we celebrate it here? It's President Kennedy's appreciation of the essential role of the arts in our lives, which inspired the nation to memorialize his life in this National Center for the Performing Arts. And so over the next year, and perhaps maybe into the future, through our artistic programs and performances, our educational activities, we will share stories that reflect the issues and ideals embodied in his 1,000-day administration. We also will look forward to exploring how those ideals resonate today and are examined and reimagined through the work of contemporary artists, writers, playwrights, musicians, and visual artists. As we recall President Kennedy's brilliant legacy, I believe that the best way that we can honor that legacy is with a celebration that not only commemorates his unrivaled achievements, but also reimagines those accomplishments and vision about our modern experience. Russian poet and former poet laureate Joseph Brodsky once said, "Remember, the past won't fit inside memory, it needs the future." Today, as we look back with admiration and amazement of what once was, we also look forward to a bright future, a horizon that we know has no limits on what it can be. So now we get to finally hear the performing arts part. We have some extraordinarily talented artists who've joined us this afternoon, and I'd like to start by introducing the first. Sphinx is a very, very compelling arts organization that strategically focuses on nurturing talent in classical music in young African American and Latino artists. We are privileged to have with us today a quartet of talented young artists from Sphinx. They have begun their own personal journeys into the world of music and have come to share that music with us today. So please welcome the Sphinx Quartet, Brendan Elliott on violin, Hannah White also on violin, Mira Williams on viola, and Sterling Elliott. Ladies and gentlemen, the Sphinx Quartet. those are really talented musicians, and they have a bright future ahead of them. I hope they'll come back soon to the Millennium stage. I want to just take a moment while they're slaving away up here to acknowledge our crew and our ushers and all the people who are trying very hard to make this all seem seamless, to have planned a whole special event on the stage that we created out in front of the building, and then on relatively short notice to bring it all in and have great sound and smooth operations. I just want to say thank you to the guys who never get thanks enough, the guys in the black coat and the red coat, so thank you very much. And they still won't take it, but it's now my pleasure to welcome back a friend of the Kennedy Center, a friend of mine, and a performer previously on the Millennium stage. Hadi Eldebeck has been a part of the Kennedy Center family for a number of years. He's a musician and a composer. He's also a member of the Silk Road Project, which is a group of musicians from all around the world, created by Yo-Yo Ma, as you may know, who come together to celebrate not just the Silk Road itself, but what the Silk Road stands for in terms of bringing people together, learning from one another, sharing art, culture, and ideas. Hadi and his brother Mohammed will now play for you, and they are performing on the oud and percussion. Welcome. We now have three really inspiring women who are coming to speak with you and share some ideas. The Chinese have a saying that I particularly like, that women hold up one half of the sky. Our next three speakers are women and who have indeed held up the sky, and I might add perhaps more than they have just held up the sky, they have pushed it higher indeed. Their journeys could not be more different in length, in focus, in direction, but they share a similar purpose and mission to make a difference, and that is what we are here to honor them and to ask them to speak about. So next we have Carrie Hassler-Radelet, the director of the Peace Corps. Then we have a young woman, Maria Keller, who is the founder of an organization called Read Indeed. And then we have the extraordinary performance artist, composer, and musician, Laurie Anderson. Please welcome Carrie.
Good afternoon. The story of how the Peace Corps came to be is one that nearly every volunteer and return volunteer knows by heart. In the fall of 1960, then Senator Kennedy made a late-night stop at the University of Michigan and was greeted by more than 5,000 students who had stayed up until 2 a.m. to see him. In an impromptu speech delivered from the steps of the Michigan Union, Senator Kennedy challenged the students to serve the cause of peace by working in developing countries around the world. Just 40 days after he took the oath of office, President Kennedy signed the executive order establishing the Peace Corps. Today, we continue to draw inspiration from President Kennedy's ideals and from his bold spirit of innovation. As they have for the past 55 years, Peace Corps volunteers today still live and work at the last mile of development, building local capacity and forging strong relationships of trust with the people they serve. But now, volunteers use modern tools and technologies to help them with their work. For example, volunteers are developing apps to help communities in Senegal map malaria incidents. And they are helping artisans in Morocco connect with global markets. And they're installing solar-powered computer labs to help high school students excel in Guyana. In the process, volunteers are changing lives, including their own. Just over 1 year ago, the Peace Corps was so proud to join First Lady Michelle Obama in launching Let Girls Learn, a whole-of-government partnership dedicated to opening the doors of education to 62 million girls around the world. Living and working at the grassroots level, Peace Corps volunteers are uniquely positioned to help girls in their communities dream big dreams and discover their own unique potential. I just returned last night from Kyrgyzstan, where I met Idai, a brilliant young woman. Idai told me that she had grown up in a remote village in Talas Oblast, where her family had worked the land for generations. One day, a Peace Corps volunteer teacher, Nicole McCormick, arrived in her community. Nicole noticed that Idai was a good student and was strong in math and science. She asked Idai what she wanted to be when she grew up. According to Idai, no one had ever asked her that question before. It had never occurred to her that she might do anything other than work the land, like her mother and her grandmother and generations of women before her. Nicole suggested that perhaps Idai should consider a career in medicine, since she was good in science and she had a real heart for other people. Idai replied, "How could I be a doctor? I'm a girl from a small village. Nobody in my family has even graduated from high school." But Nicole encouraged Idai in her studies, and Idai worked hard, and she continued to excel in school. And she began to dream about being a doctor. She began to believe that she could do it. Idai applied to medical school after she graduated from high school and was accepted with a full scholarship. Today, Idai is one of the leading cardiologists in her nation. Idai told me that she has a photo on her desk of her 16-year-old self and Nicole in her village. She told me that she places that photo in a place of prominence to remind her of where she came from and her responsibility to nurture the dreams of other young girls. In his final State of the Union address, President Kennedy declared, "Nothing carries the spirit of American idealism and expresses our hope better or more effectively to the far corners of our globe than the Peace Corps." More than half a century later, after Peace Corps' founding, that idealism still burns bright, illuminated in the lives of young people like Idai. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Maria Keller, and I believe books have profound power in the hands of kids. It is my greatest honor to be here today. When I was 8, I founded a nonprofit literacy organization called Read Indeed with the goal to give 1 million books to children in need. Now, I am 16, and I have given over 1.8 million books to children throughout the U.S. and beyond. Books are there are many reasons I do what I do. Today, I can only tell you about one reason. Books are absolutely incredible. They actually allow us to communicate our own thoughts, experiences, and memories through time into another person's mind. So when you open a book, you're actually reading someone's mind. When you open a book, you go somewhere else, to an entirely different world. In that world, there are no limits to where you can go, what you can accomplish. In that world, you create a story, a life, just as real as your own. George R.R. Martin once said, "A reader lives 1,000 lives before he dies. A man who never reads only lives once." I love this quote, and I have lived many lives myself. Just like I once hoped to collect 1 million books, I hope to live 1 million lives. And I don't think anyone should be limited to living just one. I like to think President John F. Kennedy would agree with this statement. His incredible accomplishments, his values, and everything he stood for indicate that he would have. President Kennedy was an Irish-American leader who inspired a nation to action. I, too, am an Irish-American leader, and I hope to inspire as many people as President Kennedy did with his leadership. John F. Kennedy once said that, "Things do not happen. Things are made to happen." My purpose is for every kid to be able to live 1,000 lives. I hope to make that happen. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Laurie Anderson and Ruben Kotheli.
You know, when I was 13, I ran for president of the student council in my junior high school in a small town in Illinois. At the time, Senator Kennedy was campaigning in the Wisconsin primaries. So I wrote a letter to him. Dear Senator Kennedy, I really admire the way you're running your campaign in Wisconsin. And I'm running for president of my student council. And I wonder if you could just give me some advice. About 2 weeks later, I got a letter on U.S. Senate stationery with the embossed letterhead, Office of Senator John F. Kennedy. And it was quite a long letter. Dear Lori, I'm glad you're participating in your student government and so on. And then there was a long list of suggestions and tips about how to run a campaign. And the tip that made the biggest impression on me was, spend time with your fellow students and find out what they want and promise it. In other words, be a real representative, not an ideologue. And then there were a few other things about government in the letter, and the letter was signed, sincerely, John F. Kennedy. About a month later, I wrote him again, and I said, Dear Senator Kennedy, I'm sorry I haven't written earlier, but I've been very busy. I won the election, and best wishes in your own campaign. Sincerely, Lori Anderson. Actually, there are still lots of 13-year-old Americans around these days who have this kind of, let's call it, you know, self-regard, chutzpah, whatever, but I was definitely one of them. Anyway, the next thing that happened was really amazing. A special delivery truck arrived at our house, and the driver rang the bell and he handed me a telegram. Congratulations on your election. And a long white box, and inside the box were 12 long stem red roses. And of course, this was the front page of our local paper, the Glen Ellen News. Local girl receives roses from Senator Kennedy. And every woman in town fell in love with Jack.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor for me to be here at the John F. Kennedy Center of the Performing Arts. I am mother of a young musician who has happened to be blind, but today we are lucky to have people from different countries gather together for the John F. Kennedy Centennial Celebration. We are going to listen to two great musicians that, despite their age, have joined together to talk through music. Jason Moran and Jose Andre Montano met at the Kennedy Center. Since Jose Andre is from Bolivia, they started speaking through the universal language of music. Jose Andre was invited by the Kennedy Center to perform at the Variant Suite Festival last year. And as John F. Kennedy said, things do not happen, things are made to happen. Jose Andre represents people with special abilities that have been included in the schools in all the society through the legacy that the Kennedy family left for this new generation. As John F. Kennedy said, I am certain that after the dust of centuries has passed over cities, we too will be remembered not for victories or defeats in battles or politics, but for our own contribution on the human spirit. Let us now enjoy this legacy, listening to the hearts of Jason and Jose Andre, celebrating the past to awaken the future. Thank you.
Everybody having a good time? As I mentioned earlier, President Kennedy said, why not go to the moon? That was something that many people said we should not do. In fact, most of his staff said we should not go to the moon. Most of Congress said we should not go to the moon. And most of the American people at that time said we shouldn't go to the moon. But President Kennedy persisted. He said this was the right thing to do, to prove our technological and engineering superiority, and also to make certain that American people recognized that we could do anything we set our minds to do. And so the process moved forward. And ultimately, on July the 16th, 1969, a Saturn missile took off from Cape Canaveral with 3 men aboard, heading to the moon. 4 days later, lunar module landed on the moon. 2 men were on that module. One of them clearly was a man with extraordinary talent, engineering talent and piloting talent. This man had flown 66 missions in the Korean War. This man graduated 3rd in his class at West Point. This man had a PhD in astronautical engineering from MIT. This man was Buzz Aldrin. This man is here with us tonight. It's my pleasure to introduce a great American hero who landed on the moon in 1969 and is here to tell you about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Kennedy family members, Ambassador Anderson, ladies and gentlemen, 55 years and 4 days ago, President John F. Kennedy delivered a speech which forever changed my life, and indeed the lives of all Americans. Many of you here today can probably recite by heart these words. I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth. What many of you may not know is that when Kennedy first went to his space team, he challenged them to find a way to go to Mars. I admire the president's vision to push so far beyond. After a frenzied weekend of analysis, NASA got back to him that the only realistic objective that could be achieved by the end of the decade was to put a man on the moon. In thinking about today's celebration, I recall another line in his speech. Now it is time to take longer strides, time for a great new American enterprise, time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement, which in many ways may hold the key to our future on Earth. Once again, that time is now. Ever since those first steps on the moon, I have worked to ensure that those steps were not in vain. I have continued pushing to maintain American leadership in human spaceflight. Yet, if we are honest about it, we have fallen into a malaise about the future of human spaceflight. This saddens, and yes, sometimes angers me. America, indeed, the world deserves better from the world's greatest collection of engineers, scientists, entrepreneurs, and policymakers. America deserves a commitment to the human exploration of Mars. American leadership brings the rest of the world along. As Neil and I recited, we came in peace for all mankind. Americans do these things. Think big, act on our dreams, then look back and bring the world with us. I am reminded that President Kennedy gave America a further near impossible task: show leadership by joining with the Soviet Union to go to the moon. It didn't happen that way. In going to Mars via the moon with our friends and allies, we should remind ourselves of Kennedy's vision of cooperation and recognize the value of having China as a partner. I believe that no single act could do more to improve mutual understanding and cooperation than living together on the moon while forging a pathway to Mars. When President Kennedy made his commitment, we had a plan. As it turned out, that plan was far too expensive. It required a massive new launch vehicle, the Nova rocket, which would not be available until after 1970. A talented engineer named John Hubolt proposed an innovative idea of lunar orbit rendezvous, which enabled us to get to the moon with one Saturn V. I am proud that my graduate work on rendezvous in space had some positive effect in enabling us to get to the moon before 1970. Now, I have a sequential, evolutionary plan for humans to permanently inhabit Mars. I call it cycling pathways to the surface of Mars. Missed a page. There may be a notable parallel to Apollo. However, my plan does not require a massive government-mandated launch vehicle using outdated technology. If we start now, successful human landings can lead to continuous occupancy on Mars by 2040. 7 decades, 70 years after the moon landing. This is not just a technical challenge, it is a political challenge. Most of you will outlive me, but a commitment to American leadership in space, to our first steps on the surface of Mars, will inspire the world's children. It is now on our watch at this time that we must prove ourselves equal to the challenge and get this courageous, exploring, spacefaring nation back on track, assisting all nations to occupy the moon and then on to the surface of Mars, continuing mankind's unending legacy of exploration. A president who appeals to our higher aspirations and takes us toward the settlement of the solar system's other inhabitable planet will not only make history, he or she will be long remembered as a pioneer of mankind. And if not now, when? And if not us, who? I appeal to everyone. Take up the challenge. Bring the world along. This is the time. This is our time. Make it your time. It's an honor to be here with you, honoring the man who changed all our lives. I salute those who have the courage to lead this great nation forward, taking the next advances toward our destiny. Your supporter and dedicated warrior for our future in space. Let's go for it. Thank you.
Establishes the basic human truth, which must serve as the touchstone of our judgment. The artist, however faithful to his personal vision of reality, becomes the last champion of the individual mind and sensibility against an intrusive society and an officious state. The great artist is thus a solitary figure. He has, as Frost said, a lover's quarrel with the world. In pursuing his perceptions of reality, he must often sail against the currents of his time. The highest duty of the writer, the composer, the artist, is to remain true to himself and to let the chips fall where they may. In serving his vision of the truth, the artist best serves his nation. And the nation which disdains the mission of art invites the fate of Robert Frost's hired man, the fate of having nothing to look backward to with pride and nothing to look forward to with hope. Must never forget that art is not a form of propaganda, it is a form of truth. I look forward to an America which will not be afraid of grace and beauty, which will protect the beauty of our natural environment, which will preserve the great old American houses and squares and parks of our national past, and which will build handsome and balanced cities for our future. I look forward to an America which will reward achievement in the arts as we reward achievement in business or statecraft. I look forward to an America which will steadily raise the standards of artistic accomplishment and which will steadily enlarge cultural opportunities for all of our citizens. And I look forward to an America which commands respect throughout the world, not only for its strength, but for its civilization as well. And I look forward to a world which will be safe, not only for democracy and diversity, but also for personal distinction. We see how the artist's fidelity has strengthened the fiber of our national life. If sometimes our great artists have been the most critical of our society, it is because their sensitivity and their concern for justice, which must motivate any true artist, makes him aware that our nation falls short of its highest potential. I see little of more importance to the future of our country and our civilization than full recognition of the place of the artist. If art is to nourish the roots of our culture, society must set the artist free to follow his vision wherever it takes him.
Thank you, Jason. Jason is our extraordinary and generous artistic director of our jazz programming here at the Kennedy Center. And to hear those words with your unique capacity to share through music is really powerful. Thank you, Jason. So we are now at that point of the programming, which is why we were supposed to be outside. And instead, you're going to get to see it on the video screen above us. We at the Kennedy Center have commissioned an installation to commemorate the 99th birthday and this centennial year. This centennial water garden was commissioned by us to commemorate the centennial year. It was designed by Atopia Innovation from Princeton, New Jersey. It has 3 wands and 99 free-blown glass vessels set on a mirrored plane submerged in water, and they will be illuminated by LED lights, which are a reflection of JFK's spirit of hope, optimism, and idealism. So we welcome now Debbie Allen and the Debbie Allen Academy and her Redbirds, who will raise the lights on the water garden and officially launch the centennial year for our celebration of President John F. Kennedy. And after that, I'm thrilled to welcome Jack Kennedy Schlossberg for our closing remarks. So let's see what happens out in the front.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome President Kennedy's grandson, Jack Kennedy Schlossberg.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for being here tonight. As you know, today is my grandfather's 99th birthday, and so far it reminds me a lot of my 21st. I've never been to someone's 99th birthday party before, but I hear it's customary to thank the artists, staff, donors, benefactors, and everybody who made this day possible. First, let me thank David Rubenstein. This is such a fantastic organization because of your energy, your leadership, and generosity, which are visible all over this city. The Kennedy Center is indebted to you for your generosity and also for your vision for the role that the Kennedy Center might play in our nation's capital, and your dedication to making sure that it achieves all that it should. Let me also thank Deborah Rutter, the new and great leader of this institution. She will ensure that the organization continues to grow as a National Arts Center and living memorial to my grandfather, and also has the daunting task to make sure that my sister and I are on time to all future events. I would also like to acknowledge EPA Director Gina McCarthy. Your work is very inspiring to me personally, and I hope to do something to help you one day. Thank you for being here. You're an inspiring leader. And thank you to Buzz Aldrin. I'm honored that you're here. You're a hero of mine, and I think you're a hero to every kid who sees your original moonwalk. Debbie Allen, thank you as well for sharing your talents with new audiences, with these audiences and everyone here tonight. Thank you to Jason Moran, the artistic advisor for jazz, whose collaboration with Jose Andre was terrific, and I'm not just saying that. We all thank the Peace Corps director, Carrie Hessler-Radlett, who is here tonight, whose leadership compels a new generation of world citizens. And thank you to all the young, amazing, impressive artists who performed here tonight for sharing with us your relentless passion, grace, and talent. My grandfather inspired a generation of Americans to believe in their country and their fellow citizens. He compelled a nation to send a man to the moon. He had the courage to imagine a new kind of peace, and he welcomed the challenges of his day with unrelenting energy and optimism. He was tasked with great challenges at a critical hour in our nation's history. Big questions like civil rights, nuclear war, the race for space characterized his presidency. And yet he realized that central to each of these challenges was America's identity as a nation. And nothing was more important to that than the quality of its artistic expression. For, as he said, quote, "The life of the arts, far from being an interruption, a distraction in the life of a nation, is very close to the center of a nation's purpose, and it is the test of the quality of a nation's civilization." For years, the Kennedy Center has championed this critical piece of our national life by celebrating artists who strengthen the fabric of our country. It has hosted stars of stage and screen, whose roles seize our imagination, poets and authors whose stories stir our souls and make sense of our struggles, and many others whose expressions prompt our own reflections. This institution does so much to ensure a vibrant artistic life for our nation, and it is a deep honor for me and my sister Rose to be here to celebrate my grandfather's birthday with you all. And if you think this event is good, wait till next year for the 100th. Thank you.